Hi, and welcome back to the channel. Um, Previously, I've spoke to Mike on the 9 o'clock meeting, and we were discussing Fernando Alonso on there. And moving on for the intense midfield battle, I thought today, as it was the launch day for the new McLaren, discuss McLaren. So my guest to discuss this today, as he is a McLaren fan, is Ollie from TGS F1. Hi, Ollie. Welcome to the channel.
Hey David, thanks for having me, mate. It's nice to be on the channel and good to chat McLaren.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, happy to have you here. So, with the merchandise going on sale on Friday, have you spent lots of money?
I had to restrain myself a little bit. I was because I'm a McLaren Plus member as well, so I was getting all the notifications saying, "Don't forget you've got early access at 7 a.m." and all this stuff that's going on. But I've recently moved house, so it wasn't the highest thing on my agenda. And then midway through the morning, I saw Aiden Vincent tweet something like, "Oh, just copped my hoodie." And so I was like, oh, I forgot about it. And I knew I had to log in quick because all the Lando fans will be getting all the merch. So
they'll be gone quickly.
Exactly, yeah. So I went with just one hoodie. I wanted to get two, but I thought it's either buy two and sacrifice the mortgage or just stick to one. So
yeah,
I went with just the one.
At some point you have to choose practicality a little bit, unfortunately. But no, I sympathise.
Yeah, it was. I also went with the. So I've got a lot of Lando merch. I'm actually wearing a Lando t-shirt right now. So I went with the Daniel hoodie. They'd sold out of the green one, so I've gone for the bright orange one. So I might look ridiculous in it, but it's supposed to arrive on Friday, so we'll find out then.
Well, orange, it's the colour for the team. So,
Exactly.
What did you think regarding the car launch today? And the pictures?
Yeah. I think the car itself looked, it's interesting because people are moaning on Twitter, as they always do, in terms of it doesn't look very different, but it's pretty rare that the cars look too different year on year unless there's going to be a big rebrand. I think McLaren obviously have had a few colour schemes, but like you said, orange was clearly going to be the way they were going, the orange with a bit of blue. So I thought aesthetically it looked nice again. Obviously they've made those adjustments with the floor and the back end's looking a little bit different with the Mercedes power unit.
Very tight.
Yeah, really tight. Yeah, it looked very, very interesting back there. So if they've got that right, I think it's gonna look good and go fast. But the launch itself was they have to drag it out, don't they? And I don't think they'll be the only ones dragging it out. But I was just a bit like, oh, do I need to see them rapping anymore?
I think I was sort of in the middle of my tea sorting that out when that happened. So what I got was sort of like the Lando speak up to that bit, and then it was sort of like my wife going, "Okay, just get to the car already." So we managed to miss the rapping, just we caught like the rest of it.
Yeah, so it was. I think as an overall execution, I think they've done well. I think it's difficult, isn't it, when there's no fans there? I think last year's was good and an exciting time. It was nice to see Daniel and Lando for the first time together. Thought the chemistry was a little bit off, perhaps. I seem to pick up that Lando didn't really like the joke that he made about him being quite young, but I don't know if he was playing up for the cameras a bit or whether there's a little bit of a complexion there going into his third year.
Yeah, a lot of what has been said, of course, is that when Daniel first got announced, there was such an idea from the fans about well, it's these two together. It's going to be so jokes and everything else. And neither of them particularly want that at this point. Daniel wants to be taken seriously as a racing driver. He's a multiple race winning driver. In the right team, he could win a championship. Lando spent them 2 years growing and developing. He wants to be taken serious. He's a proper racing driver. So you can see how and why, people sort of talking about jokes and the whatever atmosphere. The pair of them are still trying to work out their own chemistry. Pre-season, last year and whatever else, clearly they got on. But now it's like the expectations so high almost that it's going to be this way, that the suggestion is very much that they're still trying to work out exactly where the limits are.
Yeah, definitely. And I think to your point, I think for Lando and Daniel, they're both at stages of their career where, even though they're the laughy, jokey people that people like and enjoy engaging with, this is a real big year for both of them for different reasons. I think, like you said, if Daniel wants to win a championship in Formula One, if McLaren, if they've got this car right and going into the new regs are looking good, this might be his best chance to do it. You know, you can't go from Red Bull having a decent car and a chance to Renault to McLaren. It's unlikely then that, you know, maybe Ferrari or someone else will come in a few years, or Mercedes, maybe they will, but I doubt it. And then for Lando, like you said, he's had 2 years establishing himself anymore. He's not a rookie, he's not a sophomore, he's a, you know, fully fledged driver in Formula One, and not too many drivers get 3 seasons in the sport. And he's been the jokey kid and the, you know, the not so serious one. But when you look at his mate Albon, who's now, I don't think he's going to come back. I don't see him going to DTM and then coming back to Formula One. Perez has been around for a while, looked like he was going, but has come back in. Hulkenberg, everyone talked about the promise he had. He hung around, but never really proved himself. You know, these guys can find themselves on the scrap heap pretty quickly. And I said in the group chat that we were in earlier, I think Lando, not even necessarily for McLaren, but just to market himself to the rest of the grid, to Williams, to Haas, to the other teams, like, look, I'm a serious driver, and if McLaren decide to go elsewhere, you know, he's going to need to find a team. So I think he's got this year and maybe one more to really prove himself, because he's been outscored by teammates 2 seasons in a row, which makes sense when you're a rookie. But last year, I think he had a chance to maybe accelerate past Carlos and didn't. Yeah. He was outscored by Daniel, who definitely had a worse car, in my opinion, at Renault. So he's got to do something this year. And I think that's where maybe it would be very interesting if, instead of being really good pals, they had a bit of a grudge. But
a little bit of needle in there,
yeah. So it'll be interesting to see.
That Lando, like, well, I've tried the friendly approach.
Yeah.
So what do you reckon for this coming season then? How do you think it's going to play out?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, for McLaren for a few reasons. I think that I'm really buying into the Aston Martin hype. I think that Force India Racing Point, now Aston Martin, I think they've got a real strong chance of pushing that midfield battle even closer than it was before. You know, I kept forgetting last year that they'd had a 15-point constructors deduction from the copying they were doing. Yeah. So that would have been even closer at the top. Renault, ironically for Daniel, after starting off the relationship not so good, actually looked like they were growing really strongly together at the end of last year. He's now gone. Alonso's come in with a broken jaw. Let's find out what he can do. But I think they're going to be very compact. And then the other thing which I've been thinking about as well is, are Red Bull going to step up and get closer to Mercedes, or are the other teams now going to start catching Red Bull? Because there's still such a big gulf between Red Bull and the rest. But if that starts getting chipped into by other teams taking points off them on race weekends, you know, will Perez struggle as much as others have in that Red Bull? I don't think he will, actually, but I think it's going to be much harder for McLaren this season than it was last year to get third, and last year went all the way to the last race to Abu Dhabi. So it's going to be a tough season, but I also think that they're going to get, with the Mercedes power, a car that's better on more tracks, that's faster on more tracks. And if they've got the rest of the package right for that car, you know, who knows, maybe they'll be much more regular on the podiums than they have been over the past few years. So I'm really excited. I think the midfield, the outlier is Mercedes. They're just going to be too good again. The rest of the field, I think, is going to be really exciting between 4 or 5 teams. And I think we're in for another good one.
My take on it is entirely that it depends on which teams jump ship to next year last. Because in-season development is very much, when you've got 3 or 4 teams so close as that midfield are, in-season development could, by halfway through the season, the end of the season, be very much the defining factor, I think. I mean, I read in an Autosport article in January that McLaren had basically already switched focus to next year's design.
Right.
And I know Fernando Alonso has been saying that, as far as he's concerned, Renault should basically give this year up for lost and focus on next year as well. So you're kind of almost in the position where it's like with Aston Martin decide, okay, let's establish ourselves. They could kind of win the midfield battle by default. And it's like, I know you've got Ferrari coming back and reckoning that their engine for this season will be a lot stronger and stuff, but they're a team which are in the process of having to cut their expenditure by over half. So they've kind of got other things going on at the minute, which I think is going to distract them a little bit from it. So how much they'll be able to catch up from where they were, I'm not entirely sure. That it's just there's so many different variables to that fight at the moment.
Massively so. And I think you're right. And the thing that I always think about with mid-season development, because every year, no matter what the regs are, whether they're changing massively or whether they're having small impacts, people like to start working ahead. But when you have, big changes coming like we're having over the next sort of 4 or 5 years, it does make sense to switch earlier. But the thing that I always think about then is, what if you jump off to a really good start? Do you then need to think on exactly as you said there, the way Aston Martin might be able to is, right, well, do we capitalize on this right now? If McLaren come out, they've got a decent package, maybe they have a couple of podiums the first few races, same for Renault. Do they suddenly start thinking, well, hang on a minute, we could look ahead to next year already, like we want to, and like would be ideal, but we could nick third again here, or we could nick second even, which would be a bit of a long shot. But yeah, I think that mid-season development is going to be really interesting. And I think most teams will be looking to next year and beyond, but it always is dependent on what happens, I think, particularly in those short-term immediate gains for the season, because it is so open back there, and the money, the finances the rewards are going to get evened out with the prize money, to flatten it a little bit more now. But there's still huge differences between finishing first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh,
Yeah.
And
it's all relative. Closer than it was still means, like, compared to something like IndyCar, for example, the gaps are still massive.
Exactly, yeah. So it's gonna be an exciting one. And yeah, like you said, there's a few people who are probably looking at 2022 with their longer term programs who've been around a little bit longer. And then you've got your Aston Martins who, did everything they could to get a four-time world champ in that car, new branding, new everything. Can they make a splash? Because for their shareholders and, the aesthetic of coming in and finishing third, which would be crazy, but possible.
Yeah.
What a year for them that could be. So yeah, I'm smiling thinking about it. I'm getting excited now thinking about that battle, and I just wish that we had that level of anticipation for the top position as well.
That'd be good. It's like the battle for fourth is, we shouldn't be talking about that as like the high point of the season.
Yeah.
It's like the best of the rest championship. It shouldn't be a thing. So a drive to come in fourth.
Yeah, and drive to come in fourth. And then the other thing last season was like, will George Russell score points? Suddenly was the most exciting thing of a race. You're looking at who's finishing 10th as opposed to who's going to finish on the podium. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And then the good thing, I guess, for the future, hopefully, is if these regs come in and do mean that we can start for, worrying less about some of this stuff. So the handicap that you'll have with wind tunnel time or wind tunnel testing in the future, maybe that will be a 5-year cycle before we're actually at a point where that is, really coming into play, and it's much closer than it was. But you never know. And I always think there's always something that stands out. And when rules have to change, like the amount of downforce, that is it 25% they were trying to cut off, or 20%,
something like that. But there's always a team who'll come up with a trick, a la Brawn with the double diffuser, which, Ross Brawn was saying to people back in like 2008 that, they knew from their testing they could have recovered what they were losing in the 2009 regs quite easily. And people were refusing to believe him about it. And he was like, crap, why did I say it? I gave the game away almost,
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I remember reading that was it his book where he talked about, they went to like one of the FIA meetings, and then they posed the question like, well, what if we've got 110% of it back? And everyone was just like, nah, whatever, like what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And they were like, hang on a minute, we're onto something here. So yeah, there's always the chance that anyone could have come up with something totally crazy. I think last year we didn't see too much of that. Mercedes came with DAS, which I've not seen any data on how much advantage they got over that from last year, but it didn't seem like a huge amount anyway. The car was probably too good. That's obviously illegal this season anyway.
The theory to a certain extent is when you've got something so visible that you can see does something, it's very easy to get like all eyes on that as to what the big differences or the cause might be and get that cancelled, when Mercedes themselves are saying, well, we changed everything across the entire car from front to back.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you're talking about outlawing one piece of car.
yeah
So I don't, a lot of people are like, well, look how close Red Bull were at the end of this race, in the last race of the season. And you're like, what, you mean the one where Lewis Hamilton was recovering from a severe bout of COVID and the Mercedes weren't running their engines at full tilt and they'd already switched to this year's car about 5 races earlier.
Yeah.
If Red Bull hadn't been closer, I'd have worried at that point. I'm at a guess next year is probably, this season probably is going to be very similar to last season, which I don't want to sound negative about, and I'm hoping the midfield battle is as crazy and as fun as last year. But I can't wait for a championship fight.
Yeah, I think that's the thing as well, even with, from the constructors and the drivers. Like, I do think, I was just looking back on last season, rewatching some of the highlights and stuff, and how unlucky Max was in a couple of the early stand-ins. And he was never going to beat Lewis, but the amount of times that he was splitting them in qualifying, or that he was ahead of Bottas in a race, he finished ahead of Bottas, and then he managed to win a couple of races, of course. I think there's something in Red Bull, if they can find just those small marginal gains to reduce that differential, where I think Max could probably actually challenge better than Bottas ever could. But it's so difficult when they're just so superior, and it's always tricky not to resent them, but you've got to just put your hands up and say, within the rules, that everyone's playing to the same rules. They've got a budget which they can spend, but it's probably not as big as what Ferrari was spending before, before the cost cap is coming in anyway. But these guys have been executing at the pinnacle of the sport for so long now. And it's great to see someone being able to do it and just maximize what they're doing so well. But yeah, when it's not as exciting, that's the challenging thing, I think, for Formula One as a whole. And I think even Mercedes seem to have recognized that a little bit themselves now.
Yeah.
When they talk about things, it's not a great watch, particularly at those tracks where overtaking isn't very prevalent, that, whoever's got the lead by lap 2 is probably going to win the race, and that's that.
Yeah. So a few years ago, when it was like Mercedes versus Ferrari, and you had the various Ferrari issues at the tail ends of 2 seasons in a row, I think my quote on it was basically, it's the tale of 2 teams, both built by Ross Brawn, but one of them's forgot the lessons.
Good quote.
So, but we have fallen off the original subject a little bit here, haven't we?
Sorry.
It's the fun of conversation. So what if you were Zak Brown at this precise moment, what steps, if any, because it's clearly heading in the right direction, do you think McLaren might need to implement going forward?
Yeah, I think for me, it's important, I think, to keep giving Andreas Seidl the sort of freedom that he has at the minute. I think one thing that I really like about Zak Brown is that he talks a lot about, he doesn't know what he doesn't know. He's quite a good media man in terms of, the cameras like him, Sky like talking to him. He's good in front of the camera and for shareholders and stakeholders and everyone else. And I think he's doing a really great job of managing and steering that team. But Andreas really is the brains behind, the Formula One team in terms of how those guys are going. And I think him, along with James Key and Paul James, are just doing a great job of getting that brand, McLaren as a brand, back to where people want it to be. I know they've become this sort of fun, bubbly, very appealing to the youngsters brand at the moment, sort of the anti-Ron Dennis, if you like, in terms of where they are now versus what they want it to be. But I think they just need to carry on thinking about securing that financial future of the team, and making sure that they're getting those decisions right, because I think they're renting the MTC again now. They've had to refinance a couple of things and just get the money where they need it to be, and it's very easy to fall into where Williams are or were and still are, and where Haas are now, requiring money. You'd hate for them to have to go down the pay driver route. I know people argue that Lando potentially is a little bit, because he's a rich kid, but he's not really bringing massive sponsor things with him. So I think for me at the minute, it's just continuing to foster the relationship and the commercial nous that they've got right now, keep those key people in place. And I think for me, the next big step will be planning who's the next driver that they're looking to or want to bring in, because I love Lando Norris. I think he's a great character. I think he's a really good driver. He's shown a lot of potential. The thing for them now is this a partnership that's going to last? And if the car's competitive, world drivers, Lando won't want to leave, but I don't see them going down this, really strong 1-2 route. No one wants to play backup driver in that team now. So for me, it's probably a lot of keep on doing what you're doing. Build around that Mercedes engine that's proven to be so successful for those guys. They're going to have to adapt their package a little bit more than they have perhaps in the past few years when they've had the Renault engine. But yeah, just keep staying competitive. And I think a few of the things, this is probably a really minor one, but I was upset a few times with the pit stops with McLaren last year. I think the pit crew could have done a little bit better on a couple of occasions, just costing seconds here and there, and frustratingly losing a few places where maybe they didn't need to. But I think reliability-wise, they've improved massively. They've been pretty steady. Can't remember too many sort of technical failures other than a few sort of very public ones with, Lando saying it's broken and things like that recently. So they just seem to be on the right track generally. So yeah, my move would be keep going in the direction you're going, but keep an eye to new regs, new drivers. What direction is the team going to go in? How are they going to perceive themselves in the future? Because I know at the minute they've just started talking last week about driver salary caps and marketing spend caps, which with the new cap, originally marketing budget and driver budget wasn't involved in that. It was all the stuff to do with the car. Now they're talking about bringing that back down further again. And obviously in the past, they've not been afraid to spend money on drivers and wages. And I'm sure that they would want to keep attracting the best talent. So I think the commercial side of the business will be as important as ever, and just keeping the brand strong. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. They're looking at other forms of racing. I think they said the other week they're looking at maybe partnering with a Formula E team or entering Formula E in a few seasons. So yeah, just keeping that business developing and keeping the brand strong and on the trajectory it's at the minute. And, maybe they'll be winning races soon.
So it's possible, because I do genuinely believe the new regs very much play into the midfield teams, because they're the ones who are going to have to adjust least to it. The teams at the back are still going to be struggling to chase the money and whatever else. But when you look at, say, the racing budget that McLaren, Renault and Aston Martin bring, that's right where the barrier is for it by the time you've paid the 135 million for car development, plus driver wages, plus your designer, boss, team boss and all that lot. That's their area. They barely need to change anything to make that work. Whereas Mercedes are restructuring and selling off shares to this person and that person, and they're sort of you get the feeling the parent company is almost sort of stepping a little bit further away from it, almost, because they've kind of got everything out of it that they really can at this point. They're going down the Formula E route and whatever else as well, so they're maybe thinking in terms of developing more in that way. It's becoming more Toto's team than Mercedes' team. Bearing in mind Toto's got strong links with Williams and with Aston Martin as well. So it's sort of, so thinking back to whatever my original point was at this point, I may have got distracted. Budget-wise, they're not in the same boat as, say, Ferrari, who have got to do a top to bottom complete reshuffle of the whole racing division to try and work out where they can even put staff, because they said themselves the last thing they want to do is end up laying off everyone, you
Yeah.
know. So I think McLaren, when they had to get rid of something like 1,000 or something jobs because of the COVID crisis and everything else, there was only about 20 of them jobs or something that were actually from the racing division. And that was them trying to get into shape, thinking, well, we've got this cost cap coming in. We've got to try and, you know, work with resources and work out who we need and where we can put them and what we can do and stuff. So they're in good health for the coming changes, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one thing that I always, you know, envision, if you look at every team's spend as a bar graph, and then you just cross across, right, here's where the budget's coming in. Like you said, Ferrari are probably looking at having to reduce a gap of, you know, 40%, 30%, 50% to get to where it needs to be. Whereas, you know, McLaren might be about at the limit. And this is where I think a lot of the praise for Aston Martin are coming in as well, is, you know, Force India and Racing Point have always been below that, but they've always been competitive and floated around the podiums and the good points. And, you know, they know how to do a lot with a little already.
Bang for their buck, as the case may be.
Yeah. You know, you look at Mercedes, for example, they're doing a lot, but with a lot. And then you look at Ferrari and they're doing quite a little with a lot at the moment. So there's big adaptations that are going to have to be made. And I think if McLaren can, you know, get that right, like you said, the less adjustments to that racing part of the business, particularly on the car development side, which is probably about the spend that they are doing at the minute anyway, just really maximizing that, I think will help a lot.
Yeah. Right. I had a plan and a whole thing set out about what we were going to talk about and where we were going to go from there. Funny thing about, you know, you talking about, well, if there was one thing I could change, it'd be, you know, we had a few issues with pit stops. Man, you're talking to a Ferrari fan. But I was fortunate enough a couple of years ago now to go to the MTC, because my wife's a big McLaren fan and she like won one of them competitions about getting to go to the MTC and see stuff, and it was fabulous. And they had like the place where they practice their pit stops down by where the old wind tunnel is. And they got like the equipment there, and they've got like a board set up, you know, which is just like notes and ideas and what they're going to work on and whatever else. And on the board was simply like, smooth is fast, fast is Carlos.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, well, Carlos is coming to my team now, so, you know, maybe.
Yeah,
You never know.
Ferrari had, it just always seemed to be Seb as well, which didn't help things. He just seemed to be sat there for 4 seconds every single time at a minimum. That was a good pit stop for Seb, 4 seconds last time. So
it was something to do with the supply on wheel fastenings or something, where there was just, they just seemed to have continuous faulty batches and they just never seemed to come off pretty smoothly. It's just like, I genuinely think a lot of the problem with Ferrari is because of the cost cap. They're very much distracted about how the behind the scenes and reshuffling and stuff, and that's not helped their on track stuff. It's like one eye's just not on the racing at the minute.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that, you know, just because we're on the McLaren side of things, that's where you don't want any driver drama. Just looping back to what we spoke about at the start with, you know, I don't think Lando and Daniel will have a problem, and I don't think Charles and Seb particularly had a problem, but there was the perception that there was a problem there. I think that's the thing that gets it, is once there's the perception of it, it's like a little, you know, need a thread that people pull at. And I don't know if you've read, I was just going to say, I don't know if you've read The Mechanic, and where they talk about Fernando and Lewis and how sort of almost paranoid Fernando Alonso became just based on how the media were talking about what was happening. It just distracted the entire garage. And like you said, the Ferrari last year, they probably had one eye on the racing and the other on, like, Jesus, what is going on with our drivers and our cars and our pit stops? And
it's very difficult to The Mechanic and Mark Priestley. I'm reasonably sure I'm the person who put you onto that book.
Yes, you are. You're right. It was yourself and John T, I think, both recommended it. Yeah. Very good. It's a very good read.
Definitely. I used to read a lot of racing books, and now it's sort of like and read a lot of magazines and stuff. And as time's gone on, it's like I'm spending more time doing videos and research and less time doing reading. This is sort of like, well, what am I going to talk about on this one? Maybe I'll read a book. I'm just getting out of practice at this. It's terrible. So, right, I'm a Ferrari fan. I've been a Ferrari fan for a very, very long time. Looking at the sport at the minute, a lot of new people coming in or whatever else, and they do seem to gravitate quite a lot towards, McLaren or Aston Martin or Mercedes. And I can see very much why with McLaren and Aston Martin at the moment, why they would do, because there's a lot of energy there. So with McLaren, I remember when we went there and he's got the guy showing us like around the place in big group, it's just like everyone else in the car park driving BMWs, Porsches and various other things. There's me in the 57 plate Skoda Octavia, fitting right in. But the guy who was talking to us was just going on about how, since Zach had come there and they'd made changes in place and bringing new people in and whatever, the buzz and the energy and whatever else had just gone through the roof so much, and that they were really looking forward to that season. That was like Lando and Carlos' first year together, I think, there at that point. But even in that space of time, going from like the negativity of the Honda years or whatever else, the switch, it was sort of like new life. We're going to do this now. We can do this now. We're going to build up now. And there was genuinely belief in the McLaren that was what they were going to do. And you sort of see it almost all through the way they go about things. It's like with McLaren on social media and stuff now. I mean, I'm on Twitter. I sent an email, sent a tweet out basically sort of saying, it does feel to me like half the time, 3/4 of the people I seem to interact with on there seem to be McLaren fans. It's just like everywhere. But there's such a good buzz and a vibe and sort of almost a supportive culture going on there, even between the team and the fans and everything. So I can absolutely see why people coming into the sport now find it easy to kind of get behind them, which is good to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Zach Brown was a really strong influence in that. I was reading, I can't remember the name of his marketing company, but he was talking about when he used to race and how he wasn't the best racer, but he was always good at securing a sponsorship or doing a lot of stuff that the teams or the drivers struggled to do themselves. And he came in, and if you look at where they were watching McLaren when Fernando was there, coming back, trying to sort of reignite them, and they were having all those challenges, and it was just a bit of a disaster, and Stoffel was there, and it was just all a bit awkward. It was all a bit distasteful. It was quite difficult to watch, and there's a lot of sort of frustration. I can't remember if it was the MLC 32, possibly, that was the car that just really, really struggled. But when Zach came in, that culture change happened drastically. And then I think, particularly for the social media side of things, like Lando Norris is just like tapped into that. He's so attractive to, maybe the generation below me, Gen Z or whatever they're called, is, he's
I lose track.
Yeah, he's a streamer. He games online. He's on socials. He doesn't take the sport seriously or he does take it seriously, but there's a perception that he was just having fun, which I really liked. I think he is looking to change that. But yeah, I can see why people would tap into it, because he's almost like a sort of modern day internet celebrity for these people, and that's who kids now gravitate towards. Because I always think it as well. You see a lot of young people coming in and being attracted to McLaren and Lando Norris, but then I watched some of the races and I'm like, if this was the first race I was watching, I wouldn't care. But they're so all over Lando. The races can be still quite boring, but he'll then come online and do a Twitch stream 4 hours after the race and talk about what's going on, and there's 150,000 kids watching or whatever. So yeah, they've done a great job tapping into it, and I think they're leading the way with that a little bit now. Like, you can see the way that the teams talk on social media, from McLaren to Racing Point, who are always making jokes, even Mercedes, everyone's coming in and trying to have this sort of much more open view of things. And I think that is a bit of a contrast to how Ron Dennis was, in terms of he was very focused on the sponsors and securing sponsorship and being much more corporate with it all. I don't think they've lost that side of things. They've just adapted it now. Like,
yeah,
what did they do at the end of last season? That puppet thing where they were drinking Cokes and having Jaffa cakes and doing different things, and all the sponsors were featured. And, it's just, they've adapted so much to that digital age of promotion and presentation that, yeah, it seems like such a nice place to want to work. And I always contrast Zach Brown with Gunter Steiner, because Steiner's hilarious on Drive to Survive and he's funny in interviews. But when you watch the way that garage is managed, to me, he doesn't motivate people. He chastises people, and some people respond to that, and that's how they get motivated. But I personally, in my, the way that I like to work, and I think that's why they attract this type of fan, is that environment just seems so much more supportive and fun and jovial. And I think that's why people gravitate towards them quite a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talk about Ron Dennis and the clinical drive to perfection and whatever else. Almost Tuned did come in on his watch.
Yeah.
The classic that was.
Yeah. So it was, it's been an interesting change, and I don't see them. I see them leaning into that funny, happy side of things more than ever pulling away from that now. So if the sort of successes they've had in the past come with this as well, they're going to be one of the biggest brands in the sport, and that's, I think, what the group wants, outside of just the racing thing. McLaren Group needs that sort of eyeballs, and everything now is success is measured on, interactions, tweets, retweets, whatever. And I think that's one thing that Lando's definitely got going for him as well. If he ever starts getting into a rough patch, is like, well, if I drop a new hoodie, we're going to sell 50,000 of them in, a week. So,
well, the thing is Lewis Hamilton has proved, that sort of thing and interaction and salesmanship, almost, it can see you through the darker periods and lead you into, further success. So it's like, so long as you're a name and people are aware of you and know you're marketable, you can still go on and attract people to, want you to promote them and present them. So definitely. It works.
Yeah. The opposite of that is Kimi, who hates doing all that, but he's been around forever. So maybe you have to do all of it or none of it.
Yeah. It's like either up front or elusive.
Yeah.
Like David Attenborough, here's the lesser spotted Kimi.
Exactly. But he's that's almost part of his appeal now, though. People like him because he's so not bothered about doing it.
Yeah. So it's a hobby.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right. Well, we've sort of discussed McLaren. We've discussed a lot of other things as well, but that's all good because it's all part of the same thing. It's very difficult to discuss one without like the competitors and what may lead to them having success in certain areas and stuff, or how another factor may affect them. So, but I think, because I know we were later getting started than I'd been originally planned, because as per usual, it's like technical issues. We'll probably have to call it there for the moment, but thank you very much for coming on the show. Would you like to tell the channel, would you like to tell people more about yours?
Yes, definitely. So yeah, you can find me on TGSF1. I've not put anything out in a while because I've been moving house, but over there you'll find all sorts from, race previews to series like the F1 Draft or F1 10 in 10, where I'll try and do a consistent theme of videos on certain topics. So yeah, we're posting hopefully a bit more over the coming months, but yeah, lots of the same sort of stuff as David puts out, trying to look at things that are happening in the sport now, things that have happened in the past, and just giving my take on it. So yeah, go and check it out. And yeah, thank you very much, David, for having me.
That's right. Aren't you huge on TikTok now as well?
Well, I'm getting there. I've had it's crazy compared to the way the YouTube algorithm is working, because the last few videos of, I think in January, I did like whatever I did on YouTube, it was literally like 50x that on TikTok. So yeah, find me on TikTok as well. I think it's Ollie Swift _TGSF1 there.
Oh, thank you very much, Ollie. I shall let you get back on with whatever you're doing. To people at home, thank you for watching this video. I hope you very much enjoyed it, and take care. And obviously, watch any other videos on my channel that you might want to watch. And in the meantime, bye bye for now. Bye.